would have interest in me, and I didn't know if I'd have interest in Columbus.
Well, that was Don Waddell when he took the job as director of hockey operations, general manager, president, seer of all things on Frozen Pond. I don't know what his title is. I know here with the Hurricanes, he was president and general manager, and we'll talk about that. And we got a lot of other things to do. I am Adam Gold. This is the Canes Corner podcast. You see on the screen opposite me, Al Hood, staff writer, Canes Country, among other things. You could just follow him on Twitter and find out all about it at Al B. Hood. Let me just get the business out of the way, Al, before we start talking about this. Okay. We're brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. You know, if you listen to the podcast, I do this all the time. We tell everybody that if it's for the exterior of your home, you can find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. They can't help Tom Dundon and Eric Tulsky right now at PNC Arena because that's the interior. But if it was for the exterior, I don't know, maybe a couple more Hurricanes flags, you know, when they go further in the playoffs. Anyway, aluminumcompany.com. All right. Thanks for doing this, Al. Appreciate your time. And I know we got a lot of people online that are going to come on as they go, oh my gosh, they're doing another podcast. So let me just start and then I'll let you just work off my thoughts. Real quick. I don't think Don was entirely truthful at that press conference. I think he knew very well where he was heading. I was a little surprised that he resigned and then a couple of days later took the gig. But I thought he knew exactly where he was headed. There were multiple teams that were interested, and I know that for a fact. I won't tell how I knew for a fact, but I knew for a fact that multiple teams were interested, and I knew Columbus was interested. I don't know if that's the best gig, but he certainly is in a place that I think has a great organization. He's good friends with John Davidson. So good for him. And now, Al, you and I will discuss what that means for the Hurricanes. So I will let you fire the first salvo, if you will.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we heard the news came out today. It hasn't been made official, but it does sound like that that it's probably going to be Tulsky that at least ultimately is the general manager.
I probably should have said that. That's podcast hosting on my part. So my fault. Okay. I'm glad you're here.
But it was, I think I saw the tweet was from Cervelli first is the first
Frank
one.
Cervelli, yeah.
Who said that his understanding is that everybody, all the candidates have been told that the Carolina Hurricanes are going to go internally. You had a great point when you were pointing it out on Twitter that it either is this is the way it was going to be all along, or that the candidates that they interviewed didn't want to come into the Hurricane structure. Maybe it's a little bit of both. But I mean, that clarity I think is good and it's needed as we're only a couple of weeks away from the draft and a couple of weeks away from the start of free agency where a lot has to get done. You didn't want this hanging over the heads. You don't need the president's side of things yet. Like you don't need the non-hockey stuff, but you need your hockey stuff ready to go. And it is a little interesting to me that, you know, you point out the fact that Waddell resigned and left. Like he takes the knowledge of what this staff was doing and what they were planning on doing in both free agency and the draft to Columbus. And you can't help but to at least kind of wonder how much of an immediate impact that's already going to have for them, just as they try to reset the entire culture that they've got going on over there.
All right, let's run through some things because you referenced something I put on Twitter at AGoldFan for those of you who don't follow me. Which is fine. It's not a requirement at all.
It's a good follow.
Well, thank you. I'm certainly active in terms of I will engage, as you know. So there are two things can be true at the same time. One, Eric Tulsky this hire can have merit. Eric Tulsky had Kyle Dubas not been available for Pittsburgh last year. Eric Tulsky is likely the general manager of the Penguins.
Yeah, so, if I can interrupt too, like I was actually surprised that he didn't get the gig just because of the fact that it is the Fenway Sports Group that owns the Penguins. and they were one of the leaders in going into analytics side of baseball,
Yep.
and you could see them embracing that on the hockey side of things as well. So it was probably lucky for the Canes that Dubas did become available, because I suspect that Tulsky would have been right in that Fenway Sports Group's wheelhouse. Sorry,
There's no question about that. So he has merit. There is merit to the hire, and the hire has not been made official yet. But the other side of this story is also true, in my opinion. Tom Dundon has now embarked on 2 searches for a general manager and hired none.
Right.
Don Waddell took the job because the Hurricanes got the 2nd pick in the 2018 draft, which turned out to be Andrei Svechnikov. Easy hire. And Waddell made no bones about that. Like, I didn't want the job, but then we got the 2nd pick. And come on, I'm going to take, I'll be the GM of credit when we draft Andrei Svechnikov. And in this case, once again, they said they were embarking on a national search. I mean, we don't have to throw names out here, but there are qualified people out there.
Yeah.
That, I mean, and this is not it's going to sound like a criticism. I am not making it a criticism. I am simply saying this is a point of fact. This organization operates differently.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have a general manager. It has somebody whose name's on the door as general manager, but this is absolutely a collaborative effort. So Don Waddell, and to me, the reason why Waddell left for Columbus, and I said this in many, many different places, the reason he left for Columbus was I'm sure he at least doubled, probably tripled his compensation. B, he's actually going to run hockey operations there. He's going to be in charge of it. He was clearly not here. And he doesn't have the owner, like Carolina does here, as the ultimate authority. The owners are always ultimate authorities. But I'll just throw out an owner here. Eli Jacobs, is he still the owner of the Bruins? He's not making hockey decisions.
Yeah, the whole family is still the
right. Whoever the owner is.
Yeah, they've handed it off to the brain trust over there, the Bruins.
Right. They've got hockey people making all the decisions. Here, and I will just say what Tom Dundon has told me many times before, he thinks Jerry Jones is a great owner. And I will say that Tom Dundon embodies that.
Yeah.
Tom believes that he is as qualified as anybody to make hockey decisions. And it is really hard to argue with the amount of success that Carolina's had. So people will take this as a criticism. I'm just saying 3 division titles. They were 3 points from a division title, whatever the deficit was between them and their 1 point, whatever it was.
It was functionally a point. Like, by the time the Canes played,
right.
I mean, New York had clinched, and so they gave up, but it was functionally a point.
So they wild card won. What would have been wild card one in the second year, although they might have gotten into the top 3 for all we know, bubble hockey, and division title with Tampa, the eventual champs, and Florida, who obviously was building to this, and then back-to-back Metro titles, and then this year. So I'm not going to argue with success. So Tom Dundon you can't say he doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah. He's either been stupid lucky, or he does have an idea what he's doing, but it is a non-traditional power structure, and I don't think any general manager was going to want to come here and just be part of the equation. They want to be the equation.
Yeah, I mean, in the multiple interviews, I'm sure with you and with others, Dundon has also made it clear that he does appreciate the collaborative efforts. I've heard in other interviews where he defers to Brenda Moore in terms of decisions. Not that Brenda Moore makes all the decisions, and your face is telling me that maybe that's a bit of a stretch. But I also feel, but with the contract stuff that was going on, I also feel like, I mean, is it fair enough to say that Brenda Moore, I mean, as much as he's enjoying being in the area and coaching, like if he had his druthers, he probably, like, you've said it multiple times before. If he's not coaching for the Canes, He's not coaching anywhere.
Nope.
So at the very least, he feels like he has at least a say in what's going on here. And that's going to be another part of what a general manager is going to come in. A general manager is going to come into that setup where the coach is going to just gotten a new contract, just gotten entrenched in there, feels like he has a real say, not to mention the fact that he is just a local hero. And if Rod had been chased off, you would have probably seen pitchforks down in Edwardsville Road. So that's also a rough situation. Excuse me, that is also a rough situation to ask a GM to come into as well. But there is no doubt, like the analogy you're using of Jerry Jones is pretty apt. I would say maybe Dundon's a little less bombastic than Jones. He's
very
maybe a little less
incredibly understated.
Maybe a little less seeking of the media than Jones was.
Great.
And it's also, I think it's also clear to me that while he is, the buck stops with him, and you know what? It's his money, and look at what he's done.
He's better than Jerry Jones at this.
Yeah, he is.
Like, how many playoff games has Jerry Jones won?
God,
seriously.
Yeah. What? It's been one since the last Super Bowl, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe?
So my overall point is that Tom, it's hard to criticize the job that they have done with this power structure. But with that said, there isn't a general manager who's interviewing for this job that sees A, the compensation level that isn't coming back,
right,
and B, the fact that you don't get final say. They're just not going to do it. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And I knew all along, or I shouldn't say I knew all along, I suspected all along that Tulsky would ultimately get this job. And again, he is not a hire without merit. I want everybody to understand that. Analytics are, they are, is dominating the sport of hockey fair? I don't know, but it's very prevalent. And Tulsky has been one of the most outspoken isn't the right word, but he has been at the forefront of the analytics movement. He wasn't even hired by this regime. He was hired by Ron Francis. Yeah. So again, I am not in any way criticizing the move. I'm just saying, and I could see it coming a mile away.
And it's also clear to remind folks that like he has spent the last 4 years in an assistant role, not just doing analytics. Like, at least publicly they've said, he's been in negotiations. He's at least been learning how to do the job, and clearly enough to where other GMs or other presidents were willing to hire him to run their club. Right. So it's not like they're just picking somebody, as weird as this is to say now, this isn't like elevating Rod Brindamore to being head coach in 2018. Like we kind of I don't think there's any doubt as to the job that Tulsky can do.
Right. All right. Now let's move on to some of the things that Eric Tulsky. Well, as we transition, one thing I just want to point out, because you alluded to that we had to get. This is a move that had to be made before the draft, and the only disagreement there is that I don't think it had to be made official at all, and it might not. I would not be surprised if Tom Dundon, if we don't get an official release. They should, because he's probably going to get the job. But I won't be shocked at all if we don't see a press release, because ultimately taking the interim off the door doesn't change that it's still business as usual. Yeah. It's still a collaborative effort. It's still Darren York, who does mostly the amateur scouting part of it, but it's still Darren York. It's still Eric Tulsky. It's still Tom Dundon.
Yeah, the only clarification on that is not that they would make it official, but that they would have the clarity to know that it's not hanging over the head. There's not this doubt as to whether or not they're going to. No, it's not about the official. And yes, it's not just the drafting. It's the moves that you can make, that as we transition, the moves that you can make going into the draft, some things that you might be able to take advantage of at the draft when everybody is together and actually talking to each other, even if the crowds are a little bit, even if the GM tables are smaller this year at the Sphere thing that they're doing it at. Still,
is you going to be there?
No, God, no.
Oh, I just said. They were at the Sphere for a long time. I think Dead and Company are at the Sphere, right?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were asking if I was there. No, Dead and Company is playing right now. What are you talking about?
I'm sorry. That's so funny. That's so funny. That's like a Who's on First thing we just did there.
You two opened it up and they played there for a little while. I think they were there during the Super Bowl, because I heard a lot of media folks that were just oohing and ahhing during the Super Bowl as over the place. But Yeah, but no, I mean, I think knowing the team, at least knowing, even if they don't acknowledge it, the team knowing what the power structure is going to be going into these next couple of weeks is important.
All right, let's move on to some things here.
Okay.
And let's start with my only fear. Like, I have no problem with the free agent side of this, and we're going to talk a lot about free agents here. But the first thing we're going to talk about is the, I guess, imminent trade of Martin Necas. It's a relationship that, unfortunately, and I mean that, has to come to an end.
Yeah.
Necas wants things. I don't know if given to him is the right way, but he wants opportunities that he's just not going to get here.
Right.
He's not going to play center here. It's funny how many places I have read that try to tell me that Necas played center more, not this past year, but the year before, than he had ever played before. And that's actually incorrect. Necas played 7 games at center as a rookie before being sent to the minor leagues, and he has not played center at all since. I promise people he's not a center. Now, he may play center somewhere else, but playing center, especially for this head coach, carries so much responsibility that he just can't satisfy Rod Brindamore, not with a 35% face-off percentage, only on your strong side. Marty is a dynamite offensive talent, and I wish he would just accept that's what he is and play a certain way, but I don't think that's going to happen, and there's too much bad blood here. Bad blood is, again, not an accurate term, but I wish that it could work, but it won't. So now, here's my worry going forward. Don Waddell's greatest asset to the Hurricanes was his Rolodex and his relationships.
Yeah.
And I said that from the very beginning about Waddell, that the only reason Victor Rask was turned into Nino Niederreiter was because of Don Waddell. That's it. That's one of the 5 best trades in Hurricanes history, to be able to turn useless into useful. And that's what Waddell was able to do. I don't trust that can happen with the current regime. And that is my one fear, where they don't have anybody around in the front office who's got contacts and relationships around the league.
Right.
Maybe Tulsky has developed those over time, or Darren York. Trip Tracy does. Let Trip Tracy help engineer these trades. But that's my one fear about this. And I throw it back to you with a question. You can go wherever you want with this, Al.
Okay.
What does Martin Necas have to turn into for it to be a successful deal? And then you can go wherever you want here.
I mean, Martin Necas needs to turn into...
Try that again.
Sorry.
I took you off.
That's okay. Martin Necas, at the very least, has to turn into... I mean, the reporting out there is star player. I would say at the very least either a second line player or a starting goalie that is above what they currently have on the roster. Because even though it has not worked, and even though that there are just all sorts of points of friction about it, he is still a ridiculously valuable piece.
Mm-hmm.
And if he gets the opportunity that he's seeking, like if he gets on a team, I've got Edmonton and Florida going on in the background here. If he gets on a team that maybe isn't as defensively minded or it carries the responsibilities for their centers that Rob Brindamore puts on there, and he's allowed to flourish, and they kind of look past his face-off woes and maybe some of his defensive liabilities. Like, he could be a guy that just about any market is just going to consider a star. And yes, he is a free agent, but it's a restricted free agent. You have all of the control with him. And even if in arbitration he gets a number that you're not the most thrilled about having, you still have that control. You still have that piece. And none of the teams in the league are going to want to offer sheet him. What it's going to take is what it would take to offer sheet him would just be, I think at minimum they would be looking at giving up 3 draft picks just for the offer sheet type of contract that he would probably want to get away with. So you have to use that power and get somebody back that is going to blunt the significant number of departures you're probably going to be facing this year.
That's our next order of business. I've read a bunch of things about what Natchez could bring. Some make a lot of sense. Others make no sense. The Athletic actually thought, man, maybe Boston and Carolina have a good mix. Boston certainly needs offense. I mean, they are basically a 2-player team, especially when they got to the playoffs in Marchand and Pasternak. Teammate of his, as the Martin H, we should call him a world champion, since he does he won a gold medal in the World Championships in Prague. Man, he'll never buy a drink again at home. But they correctly identified that, sure, the Hurricanes would like Linus Ullmark, but that ain't all they'd want in that trade.
No,
you would have to get significantly more than Linus Ullmark back, because Ullmark's only got 1 year deal, 1 year left in his deal. And I might be wrong here. Has Ullmark ever beaten the Hurricanes?
How much did he play in the series? Was he was on the team by the time they faced off 2 years ago, right?
Maybe, but
he doesn't.
I don't think he. I could be wrong. I don't think Ullmark.
No, I mean, and the thing is that I mean the fact that he basically barely played in the playoffs at all should be your warning shot about just how quality of a return that would be just to get him back.
I mean, plus, what good is it if he's only got 1 year left and he's going to command on the open market a lot more than the Hurricanes would be willing to pay Linus Ullmark? So you'd have to get the goalie and something else.
Yeah, you'd almost.
I thought the Athletic pointed that out well.
Yeah, I mean, you'd almost want it to be like an Ullmark Freddie swap, and then some other players that are coming along with it, just so that, because if you're bringing in Ullmark, we were going to talk about this later. You can't keep 4 goalies on the roster. You can't keep Piotr. You can't keep Freddie. You can't keep Spencer. And Spencer's probably going down to the minors anyway. But still,
Frederik Andersen.
Yeah,
he can be had for a mid-round draft pick. I promise a mid. Give me a 4th.
Work that as part of that. But the problem is that if you look at Boston's roster, yes, this is the team that won the President's Cup last year, and it's the team that got into the second round this year and gave Florida a good fight. But when you actually look at the roster, who would they actually be willing to give up that is of that Natchez quality besides Ullmark? And they also don't have, and not that the Canes would be looking for draft picks. The Bruins basically mortgaged their draft future last year to try to go to the Cup, and they're still paying the price for that. The fact that they did as well as they did this year was a bit of a surprise across the NHL. So, like, as basic as it sounds, just flip the two. Like, no, like you
can't do that.
No, that's like the only goalie that I would be happy with to do at a level to where you'd only have 1 year left would maybe be UC Saros from Nashville. That is a level where it's like, okay, you bring him in, that's a year plus. He's younger, and 2, I think he would actually he's shown that he can carry a team. He can actually put a team on his back.
Yes.
He is absolutely.
Even though Ullmark was the Vezina 2 years ago.
Right.
So, but I think you're right. Saros better than Ullmark. Also 1 year left, and another guy that probably you wouldn't be able to re-sign based on what he could get on the open market. So while you're right about Saros is better, I would stay away from that. So, but let me interject this, and you. Sorry. And then no, it's good because this is something else that I have read that I'm blanking on his first name, Askarov, who was the first pick in the draft like 3 years ago.
I'd have to look it up off the top.
But Askarov is a goaltending prospect that they took 1 spot before Carolina drafted. 1 spot before Carolina drafted. Matter of fact, was it the Seth Jarvis draft? Might have been the Seth Jarvis.
You're talking 3 years ago. That would have been the bubble. That would essentially been the Zoom draft.
Right. I think it was. Anyway, Askarov he was the best goalie in the draft, at least thought of then. But I think that Nashville is more likely to re-sign and keep Saros than they are to go with Askarov, who didn't have an amazing season last year in the AHL. It's good, not great. It was the Jarvis draft, thanks to our friend Sam. So there are people in the comment section. We'll probably get to a comment or two. But what that would do, I wouldn't do it just for that, but that would give the Hurricanes 2 viable goaltenders of the future.
Yeah.
Maybe one turns out, maybe both turn out, and you've got an asset. Maybe none turn out because you have no idea.
Right.
I would point out that Igor Shesterkin was what, a 4th round pick? Right? We have no idea. And goalies are like kickers. We have no clue how good guys are going to be. I would go for the young guy, Askarov, and try to get something else out of Nashville in exchange, whether it's a good depth forward, maybe you get a center. Heck, maybe they want to move on from Ryan O'Reilly. I'm not saying they would. Because Ryan O'Reilly is a player, I think, that would thrive for a couple of years in Carolina's system. But again, I don't think if they're trying to get offense, they're probably not moving Ryan O'Reilly. Remember, were they a playoff team? No, yeah, they were a playoff team this year. Just kind of fell flat after that amazing run. I would try to get something else. Ask her off and something else.
Yeah, no, that one would make sense. But I mean, that's what we're talking about in terms of that's what we're talking about, because wherever Martin goes, it's pretty much understood that at the very, very, very least, they'll sign him for, if not 1 or at the very least like 2 years, so that he'll get a chance to try out. And then it's just a matter of negotiation between two. I mean, he may just feel comfortable signing a longer term deal, or at least enough of a bridge deal. I don't know off the top of my head of how many more years he has before he gets to be a UFA, but
Natchez, 2 more.
Yeah, 2 more.
Natchez says 2 more.
So you would almost imagine wherever he goes, they'll probably sign him to he would probably seek a 2-year deal to get to that UFA and use it as his real chance to prove it. He may even take a little bit below market value just with that team, just so that he could prove it. But if you're going to do that, that also makes him a really valuable asset, because you're going to be sending somebody over there who's very cost contained to a team. While even though the salary cap is going up, teams are still going to be fighting it.
Right.
And if you've got someone like Natchez that is going to potentially be an offensive spark for you at a really affordable price, then you better get a really good return for that.
If you can get him for 2 years at 6.5, that's a great return for somebody who's probably going to be 60 points, give or take. And from my opinion, and I'm a Natchez fan. I recognize the shortcomings that he brings, but I'm a Natchez fan. And I love the kid. I think the kid wants to be great. I really do. I don't think you'd have to worry that if he gets paid, he's suddenly going to tank, right?
No.
I think he is going to put in the work. His body is definitely different. He just may not ever play the way he needs to play to get the most out of it. But I mean, I wish that they could work this out here, but I think that $6.5 million for that. I thought he played better in the playoffs this year. Well, he was no good in the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
The production wasn't awesome, but I thought he played the right way. It's just not the way he really wants to play.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It just, I mean, it's a truism across all sports. Sometimes a coach and a style and a player just are not a good match, and it's not a good match. And it's not an indictment on the coach. It's not an indictment on the player. It is just sometimes what they want are opposed, and you just have to try to bring somebody in that fits the what you're trying to do, and you help him find. I mean, and that's the other part of this too. The Canes can help him find a team that, whether they're a playoff contender or not, will at least be willing to try something with him and get him the opportunity to see for himself if he can play the way that he wants to play.
Winnipeg is interested. Are they interested enough to give up Nick Ehlers? I'm just floating that out there. I think Ehlers is done playing for the Jets personally, but we'll see. All right, let me just move this to Jake Gensel. So everybody's talked a good game. I do believe that everybody is telling the truth. I think Gensel would love to be back here. I think the Hurricanes would love to have him here, but I fully expect in the next week or so, Gensel's rights traded to whatever team for a 3rd round pick.
Yeah.
I fully expect that. Hey, what did they get? They got like 2 seconds or a second and a third for Tony DeAngelo's rights.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
You should be able to get something decent for Jake Gensel. So what would Chicago give up for the rights to negotiate with Gensel?
Mm-hmm.
Give him 8 times 10.5.
Yeah.
Right.
And that right there is the reason why the Canes are going to have to get rid of him. It's because you can't, the biggest thing, you can't have him making more than Aho or around the neighborhood of Aho. Like and Gensel deserves that. And you know what, he deserves it. And this is not an indictment on him for either side for not making it work. Like, hockey players basically get this one time to cash in.
Yep.
And Gensel already has his ring. I do not blame him at all. And even if he ends up in Chicago, it's not like that would be a bad situation for him if they build it right. But fans shouldn't. It would be great if he took a discount to stay with the Canes. But again, his only time to cash in. And if the two sides have talked and they've come to the realization, and he knows very well he can get that 10.5 out in the open market, and the Canes just won't pay it, which
no question.
I understand for multiple reasons why they wouldn't. The prudent move is to send him off and give that team, the team that wants him, the advantage. Allow his agents to talk to teams, allow his agent to figure out which team would want to be the right fit for him, so they can go ahead and kind of pre-negotiate the contract a little bit, and then go from there. Get yourself, salvage the situation and get a pick, and then you can either add that pick to your system, or maybe that pick becomes something else down the road this summer too.
If you got a second and a third for Tony DeAngelo, or whatever they got for Tony DeAngelo, I think that was what it was. Then you should be able to get something that you can definitely use for Jake Gensel. All right, let's we got not that much time left. I don't want to go forever here. Not that I don't love talking to you, Al. We can carry this on offline. I'm going to prioritize who I think Carolina, of their own free agents. This is my priorities list. And I'm not going to include Seth Jarvis or Jack Drury, because we know they're coming back.
Right.
Okay. Jarvis is going to get his long-term deal. He's going to get 8 years. I would say we don't have to belabor this point. Do 8 times 8 right now. Throw that to the agent. Let the agent say no, and then we'll get back to 8 times 8 or 8 times 825. Right.
And that contract done and that contract's going to be a steal by the end of it. I'm sorry, but
I said this to somebody who agreed with me, and I totally trust this person's opinion. I think 2 years from now we're going to be talking about Seth Jarvis as Carolina's best player. So if you can get him for less than you're going to get your future captain, Aho, you do it. So let's set Jarvis aside. Let's set Jack Drury aside. Number one priority for me is Jalen Chatfield. Get Chatfield signed 4 years, 5 years, whatever it costs. It's not going to be too crazy, because ultimately Jalen Chatfield is going to play on your top defensive pairing with Jacob Slavin. And the second person I would sign is Jordan Martinook. Those are my two absolute, we must get this done, and we must get it done soon, because Martinook is part of your culture. He's too relied upon in too many different ways. And Chatfield ultimately has to take the place of Brent Burns, and it's got to happen this year. He's got to take minutes away from number 8, because I think we can all agree that when we got to the playoffs, Brent Burns, empty.
He needed the consecutive games. I love Brent Burns. I love the trade. The consecutive games and streak needs to end at some point this season. He needs to start taking the same path that pretty much everybody else on the team does. Realize that if you're going to go through an 82 game season plus the playoffs, that you don't need to play every single night. And you can't help but to wonder if he had done some of that during the course of the regular season, if maybe he had a little more in the tank in the playoffs.
It wasn't the last game.
Yeah.
But he played through an illness for a good chunk of the year. Not a good chunk of the year. He played through an illness at one point during the season that he didn't need. Now, not that wears you down, but the consecutive games streak for a team competing for a Stanley Cup can't be a priority. Right. And Rod Brindamore has so much respect for Brent Burns. I want to be fair to all parties, but sometimes you can allow that respect to get in the way of what probably would have been a better decision. And then, hey, Brent, it's time. You're sick. Let's take a few games off. I understand you have this streak, but that ain't the most important thing here. We're trying to win a Stanley Cup. But
and that's so funny too, because with just about everybody else, like, I know the guys play to some level of hurt or whatnot during the season, but with just about everybody else on the ice, if they were, say, 90%, or if they went up to Rod does not. Brindamore has shown the history. He doesn't have a problem letting someone sit during the regular season to take some time. With Svechnikov, Svechnikov took some well-deserved time during there because of injury at some point or another.
He had an injury.
Yeah,
he had an oblique problem. So,
but it would have been easy for him. But that's the thing. Like, just about everybody else on that squad at some point missed a few games because they weren't at 100%, 90%, whatever percent it is. And Rod has built the culture to where the players feel comfortable going up to him and saying, "Hey, you know what? I know we have a bigger goal in mind. This is what I'm dealing with. I want to, can I take the night off?" And Rod, for as it's one of the things I've actually respected about the culture he's brought to Carolina since then. So you hate that because he set that up. That also means that he's probably less likely to be the type of person to go up to a Burns and say, "Hey, you know what? Maybe it's time for you to take a game off," because he's so trusting of the players to tell him when they need time off.
I think it's less about games off than it is reducing the minutes load on Brent Burns. And to me, this is where, I know you pay attention to these things, and I was talking to same person who thought I was right about Seth Jarvis. If you look in the playoffs, Carolina's top defensive pair was not Slavin and Burns. Nope. It was Orlov and Chatfield. And they were not out there against third lines, fourth lines. They were out there against whoever. Rod stopped matching, for the most part, lines with defensive pairs. And a lot of times he was letting Orlov and Chatfield go against top pairs, top lines.
The team took off in the regular season. The team took off in the regular season once Chatfield ended up matching up with Orlov. And to kind of bring it back where we tangent, that's why you congratulations, you found him, you brought him into the system, and you developed him into the player. Those are the type of players that when you find them, you appreciate the fact that you got a good deal on him, and now you reward him for the work that he put into it, because he is because, as we talked about with the other defensemen, your second pair of defensemen is, both of them are gone. And if you're now all of a sudden, if you're looking at the fact that you just have Slavin, Burns, and Orlov as your three Ds right now, like, it's painfully important to keep Chatfield there, just so that you're only worrying about refilling the third pair as opposed to like having to refill the entirety of your third. So if you end up having to pay a little bit more to keep Chatfield, or if you have to throw a couple of extra years on there to keep Chatfield, you do it. Like, he's the epitome of what Rod wants to do on defense. He's the epitome of the type of player he wants to do on defense. He's the type of player that just the fans love because of the work. Like, he sat early in the year because of D'Angelo coming in while they were trying to fill out. He did not sulk. He did not. No. Right. When he got his opportunity, he seized it. And he's the reason why, D'Angelo ended up sitting. So you just have to make him pay. You reward him for that.
By the way, the head coach at that Canes Corner I hosted back in February during the All-Star break, the head coach said to me during a break, he goes, "You were right. I wanted to get Chatfield back in because I talked about it on the radio. Tony could not help Orlov. Tony wasn't playing well enough, and he couldn't help Orlov. They needed Chatfield to do that. Once Chatfield and Orlov got chemistry together, that's when Carolina's defense really started to play well. Because before then, it was an absolute mess. All right, so I want to handle something else that Samuel points out here because it'll get us into talking about something else. This might have to be the last thing we do here, Al, since we are closing in on the 45-minute mark. And this is Sam's question, do you think if Drury is signed, that means KK is gone because it creates a logjam at center? I would point out before we address that, it's not 100% that Yevgeny Kuznetsov will be back. I think there are decisions and conversations. I love him. I love his potential. It didn't go well. It didn't go as they hoped it would go.
Right.
He certainly scored his goals. He had his moments, but you saw how little he played. So Rod is not going to have Yevgeny Kuznetsov around playing 10 minutes a night. If he's not playing 15 minutes a night, that's just not going to work. So there are going to have to be some conversations. Now to Drury versus Kokaniemi. I don't think there's a question that Jack's a better player. I think Kokaniemi has better dimensions. He's bigger, heavier, stronger, but he ain't better.
Right.
Drury is better in every facet of the game. He's better defensively. He's got a better hockey brain. I think his upside offensively is at least as good, and I actually think better over time because of his smarts. I think he's a third center. He's not a number two.
Right.
I think Jesperi Kotkaniemi is a fourth center, and he's a fourth center that doesn't profile that way because he's not a great defensive player.
Right.
And he doesn't win enough faceoffs for me. So I don't know how this is going to work out. I do know that this organization is not a fan of the buyout route.
Yeah.
Even though that's probably the best thing to do.
Well, I mean, I forget that this was brought up pretty much right at the end of the season. And I do feel like that even though he has a significant amount of his contract left, I don't have the numbers off the top of me, but I do recall that just the way the contract is structured, that if they did do it this year, it would basically be a pittance if the Canes were to buy
less than $1 million a year for 12 years.
Which, as the cap is going to keep going up, that's a drop. I mean, it's basically a drop in the bucket now, and it's $1 million versus $4 plus.
It's an entry level contract,
and it's better than, and it's also
years.
better than trading him someplace and having to eat whatever portion of the salary that some team would probably require you to take,
or taking back a bad contract or a player that doesn't really fit you, or to take less in a deal just to bury his contract. I would not want to do that, but I don't think he can play here. I don't think the head coach has any trust in him at all.
Yeah, I mean, you would probably know that better than most of us in that sense. But I mean, at the same time, all you have to do is just kind of look at the pairings, look at the lines, look at how everything was out there, and you pretty much can tell how he feels about that in terms of where they stand. And you hate it too, because that is having to essentially admit that the offer sheet that they pulled on him and the long-term deal that you're having to admit defeat. But sometimes you just have to, but
it's okay to take the zero.
It is.
Okay.
And the other part of it is that, the counter is that you don't know how everything is going to fold out. You don't know who ultimately will be out in the ether for you to be able to take. Like, you don't want to buy out KK if you can't get something better back to put in that. I mean, in an NHL caliber starting center is not cheap. So,
well, he's not going to play center here is what I'm saying.
Right. No, I mean,
He's
and
going to
that
be
might
a winger here.
yeah, that's the thing. And maybe that, I mean, maybe that would be the best thing for him at this point. If you're forced to stick with him, but can you get a wing? Can he essentially turn, even if it's not a trade, even if it's in free agency, can he turn into something else to where in the end you're okay letting him go? Because yes, even if you buy him out and you save the $3 million, if you just use that money on, a 36-year-old Patrick Kane or something like that, you
Oh,
really,
gosh.
like
He's going to
that's
go back
my
to Detroit.
that's my concern with the idea of getting KK out is like, if you, like, I absolutely understand it and I feel it. The kid seems like a wonderful kid, but
He is, and he's like, he and Jarvis are besties.
but you also have to, but I mean, he has to be able to contribute. I mean, the fan base, it's at the point now to where the fan base is going to, the fun of this team always getting into the playoffs is going to start to rub off. And as a UNC fan,
you're right.
I can tell you what happens when a team that you root for starts getting used to the idea of going to the playoffs, and then you start asking that fan base to spend more money and contribute and everything. That's when the expectations go up, and that's when you have to start making those cold calculated decisions.
They're here now. That mindset is absolutely here now. I see it all the time in my timeline. Heck, I saw that in November.
Yeah.
In November, people had completely mailed it in. Not that that was going to last beyond the next win, but at every single time that the power play failed or somebody gave up a bad goal, I mean, it was the end of time, and that's
I love this fan base because it's awesome. It's great than the alternative than what we had before what we had before 18. The problem is that you've got this weird mix of longtime fans who have seen the worst, and all of a sudden it's gotten to be so good. So it's so quick right now. It's still so quick to kind of jump into the worst case scenario of everything. And the fact is that the Canes just play in a gauntlet of a division, and they're playing a gauntlet of a conference. Like I'm looking again. As we're talking, Edmonton and Florida are playing right now, and you look at the starting goalie of Stuart Skinner over there in Edmonton, and you just say, why can't we play against that? Instead, we have this murderer's row of goaltenders that we are always going to have to go through.
Right.
Because even though, I mean, Shesterkin only has one more year before he's a free agent, but the Rangers aren't going to let him go. Like
he's going to make $10 million.
Yeah. So it's going to be, it's going to be a Bobrovsky type deal. And yeah, there are going to be some years where the Rangers stink offensively when the bill comes due. But as long as Shesterkin plays at this level of net, he's always going to give him a chance, and that he's in your division. You're always going to have to deal with that. So
After next year, the Rangers will have to pay Shesterkin and Lafreniere, as well as all the other players that they've got under contract. So yeah, the Rangers, their bill is going to come due as well. As we have demonstrated, Eric Tulsky will be a busy man over the next, and I say that tongue in cheek because what I really mean, and I will relate this one quick story as we close up shop here. Last year, this is not this past season, it was the season before, I had pointed out, it was late in the year, that going forward, meaning after this year, I said, Tom Dundon's going to have a lot of decisions to make.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw Don Waddell in the elevator, and he goes, what do you mean Tom has a lot of decisions to make? Look, I know the deal. I know who's really making the decisions. I'm not trying to flex on anybody, but I've been saying this for a long time. And I just said to Don, I said, I'm just trying to give you cover, Don. I don't want you to take the hit. Let somebody else take the hit. I said, you're too nice a guy. He just chuckled, but he won. And this is part of why he is now in Columbus.
Yeah.
He wanted to be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he should. He has every right to be that guy. If you're the president and general manager of the Hurricanes, you should want to have it's on your record anyway. You should want to be more responsible. And unfortunately, he wasn't, but he's not. And Tom Dundon's making all the calls anyway.
Yeah,
There you go.
I mean, not much else you can. I mean, not much else you can say. But
And I wish him well.
Same here. Like I don't think his praises can be sung enough, both of what he did before Dundon got here, and what he did in terms of just being the public face for Comanos and making the team continue to be viable so that Dundon can purchase it, and then stepping up and just executing the plan to create this situation they have. I mean, imagine being like basically being the CEO of a company and essentially head of HR is kind of what he was having to do in a lot of ways, and what he was asked to do. And it is remarkable. And it is, and as someone who I think he's 66 now, I think I saw something like that. I don't blame him. I don't blame him.
Oh no, man, cash in.
No, not only cash in, but go to a place that they're like, no, this is your job. This is it. We've got other people that'll deal with the politicians and the arena and all this. And oh, by the way, we're not doing any big arena renovations in Columbus anyway, so you don't have to deal with any of the business side of the stuff. You're hockey, and that's just he's earned that right. Like, I don't think there should be any Canes fans upset that he left because of what he's done, and B, should be thrilled with just all the work that he did. And a couple of times I met him, it was a passing word or not. That's the other thing too. He never hides, always out front, loved meeting the fans, would take time to speak to fans, never shied away from any of the stuff. He does not get enough credit for what he did to save hockey in Carolina in a lot of ways.
That's Al Hood, Canes Country staff writer, my friend at Al B. Hood on Twitter. Congratulations to your Tar Heels headed to the College World Series. Go get them. And we'll see everybody next time. Al, appreciate your time as always.
As always.
I will talk to you soon. And for everybody, we're brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. Check them out online for all of your home exterior needs. Until next time, this has been the Canes Corner podcast, and we'll see everybody down the road. Thank you.